There is a deeper dimension within you that is untouched by time, by circumstance, and by the endless fluctuations of the mind. What we often call personality, the thoughts, emotions, and stories we carry about ourselves, is like a mask, a role that we play. It is not who you truly are. To begin the journey of personal transformation, the first step is not to try harder or change more on the outside. It is to become aware of the inner space in which your personality appears. Observe it quietly, without judgment, without resistance. Watch how thoughts arise and pass away like clouds drifting across a vast sky. This space, this presence, is your true essence. When you identify too closely with your personality, with the mind's constant chatter, you live in a state of unconsciousness. You are trapped in the past or future, caught in fears, hopes, and regrets. This creates suffering, an endless cycle of seeking fulfillment outside yourself. But fulfillment is not found in external conditions. It is found in presence, in the silent awareness that is always here, now. The personality is often mistaken for who we truly are, but in reality it is a temporary mask, a collection of traits, habits, thoughts and emotions that we have accumulated over time. It is shaped by our experiences, upbringing, culture, and the countless interactions that have influenced us. This personality creates a story or identity we tell ourselves and others. I am this kind of person, or this is how I usually react. Yet, this story is not the essence of your being. It is only a surface layer that can change, shift, and even disappear. When you look deeply, you realize that the personality is made up of conditioned patterns. These patterns respond automatically to certain triggers, whether it be praise, criticism, fear, or desire. The personality often seeks to protect itself, to maintain a sense of control and safety. It is driven by the need to be recognized, loved, and validated. These needs shape the way it behaves, and sometimes these behaviors become rigid and defensive. But the personality is not permanent. It is transient and changeable. Like a costume you wear for a particular role in life, it can be taken off because the personality is so closely tied to thoughts and emotions, it appears very real and solid. You might believe that the way you think, the way you feel, and the stories you tell about yourself are the totality of who you are. But if you watch closely, you notice that thoughts come and go, moods fluctuate, and the sense of I shifts throughout the day. One moment you might feel confident and the next uncertain or anxious. This variability shows that the personality is not a fixed identity, but a dynamic, ever-changing pattern. This temporary nature of the personality means that it can cause confusion when you identify with it completely. When you say, I am angry, or I am shy, what you really mean is that you are experiencing anger or shyness in this moment, but you have mistaken that momentary state for your entire self. This identification traps you in a limited version of yourself and blocks the deeper awareness that lies beyond these states. The personality often forms around the ego, which is the mental image you create of yourself, a kind of self-concept. This ego wants to feel special, important, or separate from others. It thrives on comparison, judgment, and the constant need to prove itself. It builds walls to defend its sense of self and clings to certain beliefs and opinions as if they were lifelines. But these walls isolate you from the present moment and from the deeper reality that connects all beings. Because the personality is a mask, it also means it can be changed, but only when you become aware of it. Without awareness, the personality runs on autopilot, repeating old habits and reacting unconsciously. But with awareness, you can observe the personality without judgment. You can see the way it shapes your thoughts, emotions, and behaviors without becoming caught in the story it tells, this observation creates a space between you and the personality, revealing that you are not the personality itself, but the presence in which the personality exists. This presence or awareness is the true self. It is not defined by the passing thoughts or emotions. It is timeless and unchanging. While the personality wears different masks depending on circumstances, this deeper self remains constant. The moment you realize this, you begin to step out of identification with the personality and start to experience life from a place of peace and freedom. Understanding that the personality is a temporary mask helps to loosen its grip on your sense of self. It allows you to see beyond the roles you play, the stories you tell, and the emotional patterns you habitually live by. This understanding is the foundation for personal transformation because it invites you to discover the deeper reality beneath the surface, a reality that is always present, always whole, and always free from the limitations of the personality. Awareness is not something you need to create or acquire. It is already present within you, like the sky that exists beyond the clouds. It is the silent space in which all experiences, thoughts, emotions, sensations arise and dissolve. This awareness is not a thing or an object, but the very essence of your being, the unchanging presence that observes everything without judgment or attachment. It is the background against which the personality, with all its stories and patterns, appears. When you become still and bring your attention inward, you begin to sense this awareness. It is not the voice inside your head, nor the emotions that surge and fade. Instead, it is the witnessing presence that notices these mental and emotional events. This presence does not try to change or fix anything. It simply observes with openness and acceptance. In this observation, a subtle but profound shift occurs. You start to see that you are not your thoughts, not your feelings, and not the roles you play. You are the awareness in which these things appear. This recognition is the doorway to freedom because it creates space between you and the personality. Instead of being lost in the identification with your thoughts or emotions, you step back and watch them pass by, like clouds moving across the sky. The personality, which is usually entangled in its stories and reactions, is suddenly seen as just one aspect of your experience, not the entirety of who you are. Many people live their lives trapped inside the noise of their minds, unaware that there is a silent observer present all along. This lack of awareness is the root of much suffering because when you identify fully with your personality, you become subject to its ups and downs. You feel controlled by your fears, desires, and judgments, never realizing that these mental states are temporary and passing phenomena. The practice of becoming aware is simple, but requires patience and dedication. It begins by turning your attention inward and noticing the space in which your thoughts arise. Instead of engaging with every thought, you hold a gentle awareness on the experience of thinking itself. This means sensing the flow of thoughts without getting caught up in the content. Over time, this strengthens your connection to the awareness beneath the personality. This awareness is not separate from you. It is who you are at your core. It is like the screen on which a movie plays. Without the screen, the movie cannot be seen, but the screen itself remains unchanged regardless of what images appear. In the same way, your true self is the unchanging awareness on which the personality story unfolds. By recognizing this, you begin to realize that your essence is untouched by the fluctuations of your mind or emotions. As you deepen into this awareness, you also begin to notice a shift in how you relate to life. The intensity of emotional reactions softens because you are no longer caught in the drama of the personality. You become more present, more peaceful, and more connected to the flow of life itself. The sense of separation that the personality creates starts to dissolve, revealing a profound interconnectedness with all that is. This silent presence is always accessible, no matter the circumstances. It does not depend on external conditions, achievements, or approval from others. It is a constant, steady presence that you can return to at any moment. When you live from this place of awareness, you are no longer defined by the temporary masks of the personality, but by the timeless stillness and clarity that lies beneath. When you identify completely with the mind, you become unconscious of the present moment, and this unconsciousness is the root of much suffering. Identification with the mind means that you believe your thoughts, emotions, and mental stories to be who you are. You allow the mind to dominate your sense of self, which traps you in patterns of reacting and reliving past experiences or anxiously projecting into the future. This constant mental noise prevents you from truly experiencing life as it is right now. The mind is a powerful tool, but it is limited in its ability to perceive reality. It categorizes, judges, and compares, creating narratives that often distort the present moment. When you identify with these narratives, you become imprisoned by them. For example, you might carry the story of past failures, mistakes, or hurts, and each time that story arises, it colors your perception of yourself and the world. This identification creates a cycle of emotional pain and mental turmoil. Because the mind is constantly moving between past and future, it pulls you away from the now, the only moment where life truly unfolds. The present moment is the doorway to consciousness and freedom, but when you live in identification with the mind, you miss this doorway. Instead, you live inside a continuous story of me and mine, should have, what if, which keeps you disconnected from your true self and the deeper reality of existence. Suffering arises when the mind resists what is. It wants things to be different, to be better, or to match certain expectations. When reality does not conform to these mental images, frustration, anxiety, and disappointment follow. This resistance is a sign of identification with the mind because it shows how deeply you believe your thoughts and judgments are real. You become attached to a mental version of life rather than life itself. This unconscious identification with the mind also generates fear, fear of loss, fear of failure, fear of not being enough. The mind's tendency to worry about future outcomes or replay painful memories from the past keeps you in a state of stress and unrest. You may find yourself reacting automatically to situations driven by habitual thought patterns and emotional triggers. These reactions are not coming from your true self, but from an egoic mind that wants to protect itself and maintain control. To break free from this unconsciousness, you must begin to observe the mind without identifying with it. This means recognizing thoughts and emotions as passing phenomena rather than absolute truths. When you watch the mind from a place of presence, you create a gap, a space where you are no longer swallowed by the mental stories. This space is where consciousness arises, where you become aware that you are not the mind, but the awareness behind it. This shift from identification to observation is profound. It loosens the grip of the mind and allows you to experience a deeper sense of peace and clarity. You start to notice that thoughts do not control you. They are like waves on the surface of a vast, still ocean. The ocean itself, the awareness beneath, is calm and unchanging. Living from this awakened awareness transforms your relationship with life. You become less reactive and more responsive. You respond to situations with clarity rather than being driven by unconscious patterns. This presence frees you from the tyranny of the mind and opens the door to true freedom and joy. The journey out of identification with the mind requires patience and practice. It is not about suppressing thoughts or denying emotions, but about seeing them clearly for what they are. This clarity leads to a profound inner freedom where suffering loses its hold, and you discover the peace that arises when you live fully in the present moment. True transformation begins when you realize that you are not your personality, but the awareness behind it. This realization is not a concept to be understood intellectually alone. It is a direct experience of stepping back from the habitual identification with the thoughts, emotions, and roles that form your personality. When you make this shift, you begin to see yourself as the conscious presence in which the personality unfolds, rather than as the personality itself. The personality is made up of mental constructs, conditioned behaviors, and emotional patterns accumulated over a lifetime. It is like a character in a play, performing a scripted role shaped by past experiences and societal expectations. When you believe that this character is you, you become limited by its fears, judgments, and attachments. You live in a small, enclosed world defined by the mind's interpretations and reactions. However, awareness, the silent observer behind the personality, is vast and free. It is the unchanging presence that watches the personality act out its roles. This awareness does not judge or try to change the personality. It simply observes it with openness and acceptance. Through this observation, you begin to see the personality as something separate from your true self. This separation is the key to transformation. Once you recognize that you are the awareness behind the personality, you create a space between the observer and the observed. This space is a place of freedom where the grip of old patterns loosens. The personality no longer controls your sense of self or your responses to life situations. Instead, it becomes a tool or expression within the greater presence of awareness. As this awareness deepens, you notice that many of the fears, anxieties, and compulsive behaviors tied to the personality begin to lose their power. These patterns were rooted in identification with the mind's story, but from the perspective of awareness, they are simply passing phenomena. You start to respond to life more consciously rather than reacting automatically from habitual programming. The experience of being the awareness behind the personality also brings a profound sense of peace and spaciousness. Instead of being trapped in the narrow confines of the egoic self, you rest in the vastness of presence. This presence is not affected by external circumstances or inner turmoil. It is steady and whole, untouched by the fluctuations of the personality. Transformation through awareness is not about forcing change or suppressing parts of yourself. It is about recognizing what you truly are beneath the personality and allowing the personality to exist without domination. This allows old patterns to soften naturally without resistance. In this way, transformation becomes effortless and organic. When you live as the awareness behind the personality, you also begin to experience greater compassion, both for yourself and for others. You see that everyone else is also identified with their own personalities and stories, caught in similar patterns of unconsciousness. This understanding softens judgment and opens the heart. Living from awareness changes how you engage with the world. You are less reactive and more present, able to meet challenges with clarity and calmness. The personality may still express itself in thought, emotion, and behavior, but it no longer defines or confines you. This shift marks the beginning of true personal transformation, a transformation that is deep, lasting, and rooted in the recognition of your essential nature as the conscious presence behind the personality. It is a journey inward, moving beyond the surface identity to discover the freedom and peace that arise when you no longer mistake the personality for who you really are. Presence has the power to dissolve the egoic identities that make up the personality and bring forth an authentic peace that cannot be found through external means. Egoic identities are the mental constructs and emotional patterns that define the sense of I as separate, special, or lacking. These identities are formed through years of conditioning and are maintained by constant mental activity. Thoughts that reinforce self-image, comparisons, judgments, and the desire for approval or control. When you are identified with these egoic identities, you live in a state of inner conflict, restlessness, and insecurity. Presence, however, introduces a different dimension, a quality of conscious awareness that is not entangled in the mind's dramas. It is the state of being fully awake and alert to what is happening right now without adding layers of interpretation or resistance. In presence, you become aware of the stories the ego tells, but no longer believe them as absolute truth. You see these stories as passing mental events rather than your identity. This witnessing brings a natural dissolving of egoic structures. When you observe the ego without judgment or attachment, its grip weakens. The compulsive need to defend yourself, image, or control outcomes loses its power. The tension and anxiety created by trying to maintain these identities begin to ease. In their place arises a spaciousness, a stillness that feels like true peace. Authentic peace is not the absence of conflict or challenge in life. Rather, it is a deep inner calm that persists regardless of outer circumstances. It comes from the recognition that your true self is beyond the fluctuating personalities and mental noise. This peace is grounded in presence, the awareness that is always here, always available, beneath the surface of thought and emotion. When presence becomes your primary state of being, you live with greater ease. You respond to situations from a place of clarity rather than reaction. The emotional turbulence of pride, fear, jealousy, or anger diminishes because you are no longer identified with the egoic stories that fuel these emotions. Instead, you rest in a stable center of awareness that is untouched by these fluctuations. Presence also fosters humility and acceptance. When you are present, you see yourself and others more clearly without the distortions of judgment or comparison. This clarity brings compassion as you recognize the common human condition behind the masks people wear. You begin to relate to yourself and others with kindness, patience, and understanding. As egoic identities dissolve in presence, you experience a shift in how you perceive success, happiness, and fulfillment. These are no longer tied to external achievements, possessions, or validation from others. Instead, fulfillment arises naturally from within. As you align with your true nature, the awareness beyond the personality. This transformation does not mean the personality disappears. Rather, it becomes a flexible and creative expression of your deeper self. The personality no longer rules your life, but serves as a vehicle through which presence expresses itself. This balance allows you to engage fully in life while remaining anchored in peace. Cultivating presence requires ongoing practice and willingness to observe your thoughts and emotions without becoming entangled in them. Meditation, mindful breathing, and simply paying attention to the here and now are ways to deepen presence. Over time, this practice rewires your relationship to the egoic mind and creates lasting change. In presence, the sense of separation created by the ego softens. You feel connected to life, to others, and to the world around you in a more profound way. This connection brings a sense of wholeness and integration that is the hallmark of true personal transformation. Personal transformation is ultimately about stepping into the timeless presence that lies beyond the personality. This presence is not limited by time, space, or circumstance. It is the eternal now, the stillness beneath the ever-changing flow of thoughts, emotions, and external events. When you live from this place of presence, you transcend the temporary masks and roles that the personality adopts and discover a deeper sense of freedom and authenticity. The personality is shaped by the past, by memories, experiences, and conditioning, and often by projections into the future, hopes, fears, and plans. These elements create a mental identity that feels solid and fixed, but it is in truth always changing and impermanent. Because of this impermanence, reliance on the personality for a sense of self creates instability and suffering. When events change or expectations are not met, the personality feels threatened, and this triggers emotional turmoil. Stepping into timeless presence means turning your attention away from the mental constructs of past and future and resting fully in the present moment. This does not mean ignoring the personality or life's practical demands, but rather shifting your sense of identity from the personality to the underlying awareness that is always here. This shift brings with it a profound transformation in how you experience yourself and the world. When you begin to live in this presence, you no longer see yourself as merely a personality with fixed traits, but as the consciousness that observes those traits. This consciousness is vast and unbounded. It allows you to witness your thoughts, emotions, and behaviors without becoming lost in them. This witnessing creates a space where change can occur naturally because you are no longer identified with the patterns that once controlled you. Living in timeless presence also means that your actions arise spontaneously and authentically from that deeper part of yourself. Instead of acting out of conditioned responses or societal expectations, your behavior becomes a reflection of inner peace and clarity. This authenticity resonates with others and creates more meaningful connections. The timeless presence is not something distant or difficult to access. It is always here, accessible in every moment if you choose to be aware of it. The challenge is that the mind tends to pull you away from this presence by focusing on worries, judgments, and stories. The practice of presence is learning to recognize these distractions and gently return your attention to the now. In this presence, the egoic need to control and manipulate life begins to fade. You realize that life flows effortlessly when you stop resisting what is. This surrender is not weakness, but a deep acceptance of reality, which paradoxically opens the door to true power and creativity. From this place, you act with wisdom rather than reaction. Transcending the personality through presence also brings a sense of connection and unity. The feeling of separation that the personality creates dissolves, revealing the interconnectedness of all things. This realization fosters compassion and a sense of belonging that transcends individual identity. As you embody this timeless presence, you live in harmony with the natural rhythm of life. You are less driven by fear, desire, or the need for approval, and more motivated by a sense of purpose, aligned with your true self. This alignment leads to a life of greater fulfillment, peace, and meaning. This transformation is not a one-time event, but a continuous unfolding. Each moment offers an opportunity to deepen your presence and transcend the limitations of the personality. With practice and dedication, living from this timeless presence becomes your natural way of being, and personal transformation unfolds effortlessly and fully.